The 99ers are resurgent after a regrouping spell in preparation for the American autumn. OWS Week stayed in Charlotte, North Carolina to capture the last days of popular protests against the two-party system in America. Patriots and veterans converged on the Obama headquarters in Washington, D.C. and Chicago in support of Bradley Manning, and there was a side of demos against drones. Also in Chicago, Fannie Mae got it, and there was highly controversial action among Occupy factions. Young folks burning registration cards and ripping up the Constitution with the ultimate symbolism reminiscent of burning draft cards back in the days of the Vietnam War. It's all there this week, and this occupation is not leaving. Populist activism is on the rise in the U.S. as we head into the second American autumn. Occupy Wall Street and its allies among union, immigrant, and environmentalist factions have had a busy week. Occupiers from Los Angeles, Ontario, and Riverside, California joined with the Immigrant Youth Coalition to protest against Sheriff Lee Baca at one of LA County's jails. Deportations from Sheriff Baca's jail have surpassed those of infamous Arizonan Sheriff Arpaio. Protesters were there to promote the Trust Act, which would forbid local law enforcement from complying with federal requests to detain suspected illegal immigrants. Across the country in Charlotte, North Carolina, the Democratic National Convention presented carefully orchestrated events with party leaders delivering well-crafted speeches to adoring partisans in the crowd. Prominent Democrats appeared one by one to promote an incumbent president as tough on terrorism, tight on budget, and in it for everyday people.
Putting CCS on a natural gas plant is considerably less expensive.
Buys elections, take the money out. Corporate power 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 buys elections, take the money out.
We came here because the nuclear energy industry is a great example of an industry that they couldn't stand on their own. They couldn't make it in the marketplace. They were just talking about how much they need the subsidies of the government in order to exist. Yeah. And what it comes down to is that they're using their money to buy the election so that they get the policies that they want.
Leave the property, please.
All right, yeah, we're on our way out.
Okay. Just please go ahead and leave.
So, what we wanted to make the point is that this is a technology that can't survive on its own, so they're just investing money in politicians to buy the kinds of policies that make them make money for them.
So you're not blocking the street.
Yeah, so ever since with the advent of Citizens United and unlimited corporate financing, politicians have become beholden to their corporate paymasters, and here we have a hallway, a media hall sponsored by one of the largest weapons manufacturers, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies that is busy impoverishing developing countries so they don't have access to affordable medication. We have the first company to try to make a new nuclear power plant for a generation. They're all there sponsoring something around the Democratic National Convention, so we just want to know what we can. We want Governor Romney and President Obama to both agree to a constitutional amendment that shows that corporations are not people and money is not free speech.
See if you have it. He's in the house. You'll be able to make phone calls.
Okay, yeah, so...
Protesters from Occupy, Code Pink, various unions, environmental and social justice groups hovered about, playing a counterpoint of persistent actions aimed to highlight realities they say Democrats would prefer not to address.
In Jerusalem, rather than supporting a just peace in Israel and Palestine. Can you answer? It's not because of the Israel lobby money? All of our money on the defense budget, and it's time to invest in education and healthcare and infrastructure.
Democratic speeches of major players, including the First Lady herself, were disrupted by passionate pro-peace voices within the convention halls at the same time as actions aimed to occupy Obama headquarters were happening in the streets of several American cities, including Washington, D.C. and Chicago, Illinois.
We're here at the Democratic National Committee headquarters in Washington, D.C. To protest the incarceration of Bradley Manning, his punishment before trial, and demand that his charges be dropped. We're doing this on a day that President Obama accepts renomination to run for office again for a second term. We've discovered in this case that the decisions on Bradley Manning are being made at the highest levels of government. It was not a decision based in Quantico that he was held in solitary confinement. Rather, it was a decision based in the Pentagon by a three-star general, General Flynn. And when a general at that level, who's confirmed by the Senate, appointed by the President, there's only 60 of those generals, lieutenant three-star generals, when those guys make decisions, they do it with a political eye. And so we have no doubt that there's been some discussion at higher levels, whether it's the White House, the Joint Chiefs, or the Secretary of Defense, we don't know yet. But this was a decision to mistreat this young soldier before trial, to punish him in violation of military law. And as a result, this case should be dismissed. And that will be argued after Thanksgiving, November 27th. Bradley Manning will testify about his confinement, which will be a very emotional testimony, I imagine, very humanizing testimony. And so we're here to bring the message to President Obama. He has the power, as the Commander-in-Chief, to end this prosecution, just as he had the power to end the solitary confinement. In the end, he did so when pressure was put on him. When we protested at Quantico, when we did phone calls and emails to the White House, when law professors around the country wrote to President Obama, when the Assistant Secretary of State quit over this issue, it focused the attention on Obama. He has the power to control this. He has the power to end this prosecution. He needs to take his responsibility seriously as Commander-in-Chief. The only just result is to stop the prosecution of Bradley Manning.
In D.C., peace and justice organizations comprised of civilian and military veteran patriots delivered a letter to President Obama on behalf of Private Bradley Manning, highlighting the brutal treatment of the alleged whistleblower to date, the President's ill-advised statement about Manning's guilt, and appealing to President Obama to do something based on his own promises of transparency, truth, justice, and the importance of informed citizens to the function of society. Occupy Chicago joined anti-war and drone groups for a march on Obama's headquarters, saying they reject President 1% and calling for an end to Obama's wars on the world's 99%. The streets and independent media were the only places constant war, killer drones, and whistleblower persecution were mentioned, as the halls of the Democratic Convention reverberated with meaningless promises, half-baked truths, over-the-top partisan fervor, and lapdog mainstream media, complicit in ignoring realities of the pro-1% policies of the sitting president and his party.
And we're here today with Occupy Obama, Action by Occupy Chicago, and I brought along a 1/5 actual size model of a Reaper drone. And this was produced in New York State by No Drones, and they're supplying replicas to protesters all around the country. So right now there's one down in Charlotte at the Democratic National Convention. There's one up in Wisconsin where they had a die-in a few days ago. There's one down in Indiana and across the country. The only person who's not talking about drones this week is Barack Obama. Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia. Some of the drone strikes are carried out by the Department of Defense, for instance, in Afghanistan, and they're also doing the ones in Yemen now. Notably, the drone strikes in Pakistan are all done by the CIA. So they are classic extrajudicial executions or assassinations that are done on the say-so of the executive branch with no due process. Now, Eric Holder, the Attorney General, came to Chicago in March, and it was the same day that they announced that the G8 would not be coming to Chicago. Eric Holder came and he sat at Northwestern University and talked to an audience of law students, law professors, lawyers, and other public officials, and explained that according to this administration, due process doesn't really necessarily involve judicial process. And in fact, the process that's involved is the executive branch evaluating according to a few criteria, like whether they think the people involved pose a risk to the United States. And when that happens, they call a strike. I was there that day, and outside that presentation, I asked one of the young law students, "What did you learn today?" And he said, Eric Holder said that he can basically kill anyone he wants. So due process is a critical part of the Constitution, and I'm going to show my forgetfulness of the specific article, but everybody is entitled to due process. And equally critically, the United States is a party to international treaties and conventions, including the Geneva Convention, which require that there be due process in acts of war and penalties against combatants. So the United States is now contravening all sorts of its own laws and international law.
The 99 Percenters organized many actions in the waning days of the DNC. Occupy Charlotte encamped once again. Music festivals and parties for clean energy were held, along with a solidarity rally for Bradley Manning and anti-APAC and Duke Energy rallies.
We just saw Representative Steny Hoyer from Maryland, one of the most liberal states in the country, come out of a meeting of APAC representatives. I asked him to please stop the funding of Israel's apartheid system, allow there to be peace in the Middle East by defunding Israel's military machine, and he shook my hand and basically didn't answer any questions. It's sad because he's one of the most important Democrats that are here in Charlotte right now. He's second only to Nancy Pelosi in the party, and it's shameful that such big names as Senator Barbara Boxer, Max Baucus, Steny Hoyer, Sherrod Brown, Senator Menendez from New Jersey, all these high officials in the Democrat Party are coming out to pander to the APAC lobby.
The activists in Charlotte were echoed in Chicago, where the controversial Occupy Democracy Hell No action was held.
Guy with the boot on his head, see me around?
Wake up, we will see you.
Some protesters illustrated their disgust with the two-party farce and civil rights suppression of the past year by burning voter registration cards and symbolically shredding the Constitution. These actions did not sit well with several 99ers who held a counter-action to affirm the importance of the right to vote, especially among minorities who gained the right relatively recently. The point, however, has been driven home again and again. Every 4 years, Americans step into the ballot box to select a fellow citizen to represent the USA at home and abroad. And every 4 years, they are presented two options, whose solutions for the world fail to address even the most basic needs.
The problem is the system, the capitalist system, and what it's going to take to uproot that system is revolution. And so people can come into that movement for revolution on all kinds of different levels. We can be debating and discussing along the way. We really need to get at sort of what fundamentally needs to change in the world because we're at a very dire situation with the conditions that humanity is facing as well as the planet itself. We are here to try to challenge people who are choosing the lesser of two evils, to have people really look at the reality of what the Obama administration has meant for the world over the last 4 years, and that we don't need to choose the lesser of two evils. People need to fight for the kind of world that they want to live in, that liberates all of humanity, and not settle for anything less.
The dire aspect of the situation is emphasized by the cynical decision made by many citizens to vote for the lesser of two evils. Occupy has demonstrated against the farce of the 2012 presidential election, the failure of either candidate to address endless war and the global failure of capitalism, and is refusing to put the future in the hands of any evil, be it Democrat or Republican. Chicago was hopping this week. Chicago Teachers Union met on Labor Day to rally for jobs, dignity, and a fair contract. The teachers have been negotiating with Democratic Mayor Rahm Emanuel and the Chicago Board of Education for a fair CTU contract, and have been forced into a showdown by politicians and bureaucrats bent on scapegoating union workers in order to force concessions on hard-won workers' rights as part of the city's austerity measures.
And we will sing.
Okay, well, we need Marshall.
Chicago teachers, parent, and community activists are standing up for public education in the face of an all-out assault to privatize schools, close and cut programs in poor neighborhoods, and experiment on Chicago's student population to their detriment. The teachers' union has had enough and has called a strike. It will be interesting to see how the city's leaders, supposedly pro-union Democrats, will respond in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, the nation's leaders, supposedly pro-worker Democrats, continue their implementation of the Trans-Pacific Partnership behind closed doors.
Why I'm here? Yeah. Well, I work with Rainforest Action Network, and I came here from San Francisco because, in general, we know the way that these free trade agreements play out, that they're bad for the environment, they're bad for workers, and just about everybody except for the corporate bigwigs behind them. Specifically, we're working targeting Cargill Corporation right now, and Cargill is the largest privately held company in the world, and they're the biggest importer of palm oil into the United States. And palm oil almost exclusively comes from Malaysia and Indonesia, where it's one of the biggest causes of rainforest destruction in the world today. And so Cargill has pushed very heavily for this agreement to go through. They've invested a lot of resources and lobbying efforts. And if this went through, it would potentially allow them to distribute, rainforest destroying, human rights violating palm oil across the world with impunity. So we're very keen to take this out of the shadows and make sure that to shine some light where these big companies would like it not to be shown.
Another stakeholders forum was held in Leesburg, Virginia, and occupiers joined up again with trusty allies from union and environmental groups to occupy the TPP and stop the global corporate coup. U.S. negotiators have granted approximately 600 corporate lobbyists access to the negotiating texts, but have flatly refused to tell the American public the proposals being put forth.
We're here at the TPP negotiations today to protest the issue of forced labor in Vietnam. Right now there's over 40,000 people who are in drug detention centers in Vietnam, and most of whom are drug addicts or alleged drug addicts, but they're rounded up and thrown into these camps by the government where they don't receive any drug treatment and they're forced to work. This is the Vietnamese government who runs these camps. So we're here to send a message to USTR that trade deals with countries that don't respect the international law against forced labor is probably not the way to go. Thanks.
The Obama administration is pushing for completion of negotiations prior to the November election because they know labor and progressive groups are less likely to criticize the president before the election. Protests against Fannie Mae were also held across the country during the week. Occupy Chicago once again mounted an action to draw attention to an epic state of crisis in the U.S. Almost 100 families evicted from their homes each day by Wall Street banks and the politicians funded by them.
So today we had a demonstration that started at the regional headquarters of Fannie Mae, and afterwards, after hearing from several homeowners who are underwater or facing eviction from Fannie Mae, we marched about a half mile to the 2012 campaign headquarters of the Barack Obama campaign.
The most vulnerable communities have been affected. Over 35% of African American homes are underwater, and at least 1.5 million homeowners over the age of 50 have lost their homes since 2007.
Well, in Chicago, a couple things happen. Families are pushed out, they're relocated. A vacant home, it depends on how the home became vacant, one. Two, usually in this city, it becomes a toxic access. The banks may absorb it or they just let it go, and then it becomes a sore eye on people in your block, in your community, and then your community becomes run down in those sorts of ways. So vacant homes, a lot of times, you have homeowners who don't want them anymore, so they burn them down, or they just sit there. Like now in Chicago, you have hundreds of homes. For every one homeless person, there may be 5 or 6 vacant and abandoned homes. So they just sit there, and the city doesn't feel like it's a necessity. They don't feel like it's an issue for the city of Chicago. They feel like it's a national issue. I feel like now is a very dire time, and if we fix something like our housing problem or the poor people's problem, then we fix everybody's problem, or at least the majority of the problem. And I think that the reason why we have such a great housing epidemic isn't really one for a very purposeful reason. It's the have and the have-nots. It's us and them. And it's because they feel like they have the power to do that. And I wish that people understood their power and their power in numbers, their power to question, their power to make change in their communities and their lives as individuals.
Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac control over 60% of the mortgages in the U.S. and have been accused of gambling with people's money, buying up subprime mortgages during the housing bubble, leading to U.S. government conservatorship in 2008 and billions of dollars in bailouts. Over 16 million underwater homeowners could be helped by principal reduction, but the tactic has been refused by the Federal Housing Finance Agency, and the Obama administration has so far avoided taking any actual effective action on behalf of the American families caught in the crisis. Occupy Chicago met at Obama's headquarters to call him out on his hypocrisy and expecting millions of American families to vote for him when he has done virtually nothing to alleviate their struggles. Anyone paying attention to the Occupy movement and the populist uprising in the U.S. knows that many problems have been identified by savvy citizens in the movement, and many solutions have been put forth. It's really a shame that mainstream media has heedlessly misrepresented the brilliant hope underlying American activism on the rise, and that members of the U.S. government, no matter the party alliance, are more interested in silencing and suppressing the citizenry than engaging in dialogue, rolling up sleeves, and working for real change. As Occupy Wall Street looks ahead to its September 17th anniversary, one thing is very apparent. The people intend to be heard, and the occupation has only just begun.